Genie is a feral child who was discovered by California authorities in 1970. Genie had been kept isolated in the same room for 11 years and since birth had almost no human interaction. Throughout history, there has been reported cases of feral children who were actually raised by animals. But in modern times, feral children are usually raised in confinement, which was the case with the feral child known as Genie. If you've never heard this story, then buckle up and get your popcorn ready because this is one wild tale. Genie was born in California in the year 1957. Unfortunately, Genie's father was an unhappy and violent man. Genie's mother was routinely beaten and not allowed to leave the house. On one occasion, while she was pregnant, he almost strangled her to death. Despite this, she gave birth to a healthy child, which was their first. Unfortunately, Genie's father found his first child's crying to be annoying and therefore placed her in the garage, where she caught pneumonia and died at the age of 10 weeks. Genie's parents also had a second child who died at only 2 days old. Eventually, the couple gave birth to a healthy boy. But Genie's father never allowed the boy to speak, which caused substantial delays in his development. 5 years later, Genie was born. By this time, her father had grown increasingly angry and bitter. So, when Genie showed potential signs of being physically and mentally disabled, he grew increasingly withdrawn. Genie's father began to completely ignore her, and he strongly encouraged Genie's mother and brother to do the same. Then, when Genie was 20 months old, a tragedy would strike that changed the lives of everyone involved. Genie's paternal grandmother, so her dad's mother, was killed by a drunk driver. When the driver received only probation, Genie's father became completely enraged. He immediately quit his job and moved his family into his mother's 2-bedroom house. However, he demanded that his mother's bedroom remain untouched, as a shrine to her. So, the entire family, except for Genie, would sleep in the living room. Genie was banished to the back bedroom. There, she was tied to a child's toilet with a makeshift harness, which basically functioned as a straitjacket. She wore nothing but a diaper and did not use the child's toilet, instead relieving herself in her diaper. If Genie vocalized or made any noise, her father would beat her with a large wooden stick that he kept in her room. Genie's father fed her as little as possible and often refused to feed her at all. She never received any type of solid food and her diet consisted of baby food, cereal, or liquids. If she was lucky, she might get a soft-boiled egg. Genie's mother stated that hunger would sometimes cause Genie to make noises, signaling that she wanted food. But this would usually lead to Genie being beaten by her father. Genie's mother was not allowed to feed or care for Genie at all. However, her mother would often sneak some additional food to Genie late at night. Genie's room was kept extremely dark, with 2 blacked-out window curtains. The only contents in the room which provided any type of stimulus were the crib, the child's toilet, the curtains, 3 pieces of furniture, and 2 plastic raincoats hanging on the door. If she was lucky, Genie would sometimes hear nature sounds or a nearby child playing the piano. Genie's brother was also the recipient of frequent and severe beatings and he attempted to run away several times. Genie's mother was extremely passive and she had become increasingly blind. Genie's father told her that if she ever contacted her parents or the police that he would kill her. Then in October 1970, Genie's mother grew tired of her husband. So, one day after Genie's father left the house, her mother took the opportunity to remove them from the situation and left the house with Genie. Genie's mother attempted to apply for disability benefits on account of her blindness. However, she entered the wrong building, which happened to be the building for social services. The social worker who greeted them immediately sensed that something was wrong and after asking a few questions, the agency contacted the police. Genie's parents were arrested. Due to her physical condition and unsocialized state, Genie became a ward of the court. At the time she was 13 years old and she had spent over a decade in isolation. By November 17, 1970, the media had picked up on the curious case of Genie and her abuse. The one photograph released by authorities seemed to significantly fuel public interest. Genie's father refused to speak to the police or the media. But eventually, large crowds of people attempted to get his attention, which he found quite difficult. So, 3 days later, on November 20th, Genie's father took his own life via gunshot. A note was left behind which contained the declaration, quote, "The world will never understand." Genie's mother told the court that the beatings from her husband and her blindness had left her unable to protect her children. The charges against her were dropped and she received counseling from the hospital. Genie's new caretakers quickly noted that she was extremely pale and malnourished. She was only 4 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 59 pounds. Genie was unable to fully stand up straight or to fully straighten any of her limbs. This caused her to move around with something known as a bunny walk. This is where she would walk with her hands in front of her like claws. Researchers stated that this showed an extreme difficulty with sensory processing. The restraining harness her father used had caused a thick callus and heavy black bruising along her back, which took several weeks to heal. Genie did have normal vision in both eyes. However, she could not focus on anything more than 10 feet away from her, which corresponded to the dimensions of the room where she was held captive. Researchers determined Genie's motor skills to be approximately at the level of a 2-year-old. She was not able to chew any solid food and would place food into her mouth until her saliva broke it down. If this process took too long, she would spit out the food and mash it with her fingers. Genie was also completely incontinent. This means that she was unable to restrain herself when it came to things like urinating, defecating, spitting, and even pleasuring herself. Researchers were able to estimate that Genie's mental abilities scored at the level of a 1-year-old child. Genie was craving for stimulus, and she was fascinated by new objects and new sounds. One thing that Genie absolutely loved was live classical music played in front of her. Researchers noted that she did not have the same reaction to recorded music. They quickly determined this must have been due to Genie sometimes being able to hear classical music being played outside her window during her captivity. After a few months, Genie began to put on weight and become steadier in her movements. She was also slowly starting to form relationships and began giving and receiving hugs. Her vocabulary also improved, and she was able to speak about 15 words, which included her own name and the names of a few people. But her only active phrases were, "Stop it," and "No more," and she treated them as individual words. As time went on, Genie learned more basic language skills, social skills, and she excelled at nonverbal communication. This included gestures, drawings, and even some sign language. However, she was unable to acquire a first language and the ability to verbally speak. As she got older, many different researchers met with and studied Genie. At first, there was hope that one day she might fully recover. But then, infighting between researchers, caretakers, and her mother caused Genie to be moved between a series of different foster homes. At times, she would continue to show significant improvement. She was even able to put several words together and was slowly starting to recount some of the abuse that had happened to her. At one point, Genie told researchers that, quote, "Father hit big stick," and, quote, "Father is angry." But other times, when her care wasn't as good, she would quickly regress. One foster home physically abused Genie. This caused her to become extremely withdrawn and almost never speak. From there, it seems like her care and her progress may have gone downhill. One of the psychiatrists who grew close to Genie visited Genie on her 27th and 29th birthdays, and he described her as mostly silent and depressed. Since then, very little is known about Genie and her whereabouts. As of 2016, it appears that Genie remains a ward of the state of California and lives in an undisclosed location in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we'll know the full truth anytime soon. One of the researchers who worked with her stated that she's been trying to contact her since the 80s, and the closest she's gotten is the social worker assigned to her case. Much of the research done with Genie was around how humans develop language. In the end, it's believed that Genie's case demonstrates the necessity of early language development, probably by the ages of 5 to 10 years old. It's also said to demonstrate that language is different from thought. After all, Genie became quite adept with nonverbal communication, but she was never quite able to grasp grammar and verbal communication. The fact that Genie was such a valuable test subject is quite possibly what led to her not always receiving the best care. In the end, the case of Susan Wiley, better known as Genie, is extremely sad and unfortunate. We can only hope that she's doing well and is able to experience the happiness which she very much deserves. So, what are your thoughts around the case of the feral child known as Genie? We'd love to hear them in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, we would appreciate a quick click on that subscribe button. That way, you can stay up to date when we release our next video about one of the most interesting things in the world. In the meantime, stay safe out there, and keep exploring.